Hello and welcome to a Transformers Reader review of Transformers Beast Wars Polar Claw. Polar Claw was released in the original wave of the Beast Wars line. He is quite clearly depicting a polar bear, a bit of a thick one at that, but nevertheless a polar bear recognizably. This mold was used several times over, once for I believe a BotCon exclusive brown bear repaint, and then again as a darker repaint in the Beast Wars Neo line as a character known as Survive. In his bear form, his articulation is a little bit limited. Ball joint at this shoulder connected to a hinge here. It's the same for both arms. The legs, while they're hinged and can move individually as such, you just saw a little bit there of his gimmick in this mode. The articulation helps trigger that. If you would hold his legs steady in the back here and raise him up, a mechanism inside triggers his mouth to open and these fangs to show off. The lighting's not great, trying to make sure that that can be seen. So all in all, does what you would think a little plastic bear should. Almost showing off some more surprises there. For a size comparison, compared to another figure of his time, this was the basic class Razor Beast from the Beast Wars line. So there they are next to each other. Can't say I'm well versed in my zoology, but I do think that this may be maybe a little too close in size between a warthog and a polar bear. Nevertheless, looks pretty nice, and let's get into the transformation a little bit on this guy. Alright, to transform Polar Claw, what you're going to want to start off with, or at least what I always start off with, is just pulling his arms out on these hinges as forward as they'll go, and then rotating them around and kind of up like this. This is not necessary by any means. They can stay right where they are. It just make everything difficult. You are going to need him out of the way when you deal with his undercarriage stuff anyhow. Next thing I like to do personally, come to the back of his polar bear legs and pull out what will be the majority of his robot mode legs. Flip his little toes out too now if you'd like. A little difficult if you don't have any fingernails. Okay, so come on to this undercarriage now, as I spoke of a little bit ago, and flip it out. You're going to take this belly panel, pull that down, and up here at the polar bear's ears, you're going to want to pop it off and open it up. So now when your polar bear is freshly filleted, you're going to take the polar bear head, fold it down, and here's where you want to take the back side of the polar bear's head and peg that in once more, and that'll peg this into place, locking up that mechanism that opened up the polar bear's mouth before. Closing that up, which will allow you to lower these legs without affecting his head or anything like that. Now you can flip these arms around, flip out his robot mode hands. This guy's getting a little bit taller now in his robot mode, so we're going to want to stand this up. Now I like to just kind of fold these back, these polar bear arms, and here you have your Polar Claw in his robot mode. In robot mode, you have a couple options for your Polar Claw figure. Being from the first wave of the Beast Wars line, they included the mutant head gimmick, which is what you see in front of you now. This is supposed to be the mutant head, which to me looks a little bit more technological than his regular one, which you can see just by rotating it around. And this one, which has a little bit more paint on it, is what I would use as his default head for this figure. I'll cover gimmicks real quick before I talk about articulation in the robot mode. One that I almost showed off earlier. You move this paw around. There's a little trigger on the side here, and it activates this attack claw, which actually has some really nice detailing on the claw piece itself. It almost looks like bone, which can be a bit creepy thinking about it in context. And then his other paw here also has a gimmick loaded in. This triggers on the top down here, and I'm trying to show this off not too terribly bad. You can fire that paw, which hopefully will automorph that paw into a little bat drone. I think that's really cool. However, personally, I turn it around, and using this the port where it plugs into the shoulder here, I use that kind of like a barrel, and I consider this his handgun. It's entirely a headcanon thing. I don't think that's an intentional design inclusion, but I like it, and I think it's fairly nice. And you can always leave this up here on this shoulder as a shoulder cannon as well. All kinds of different things you can do. Now, taking this away just for a second, articulation on this figure is actually pretty nice, especially if you think of what came immediately before it in its time period and everything. Its head has a 360-degree swivel. There's a ball joint on the shoulders. If you want to use that transformation joint, you probably shouldn't. It looks pretty bad. But, hey, it's your toy. You can do whatever you want. Elbow ball joint. A little transformation joint at the wrist, which can kind of flip it up or down. These hip joints don't go out much at all, but they go forward that far. They don't go back, so really just a kicking motion, which is alright. Knees go all the way back, and a little bit of toe waggle. But for the most part, I think that it's just expressive enough and nice enough to really get the job done. Especially just for his size, he's just going to stand there looking pretty imposing on your shelf. And real quick before we wrap things up here, now a few more size comparisons in robot mode here. We just compared him in beast mode to Razor Claw. Here he is in his Razor Beast. Sorry, Razor Claw's a different figure. This is in their robot mode comparison. I think this looks a bit better. Perhaps if you told someone they're alt modes and they were looking at them in robot mode, they might tend to believe you a little bit more. Another comparison, Energon Tow Line. Alright. Okay, that'll about wrap it up for today. Thank you for watching, and be sure to tune back in for more Transformers reviews. This has been Starscream's Ghost. Have a wonderful day.